"Dad, look at those kids in the trash, they look like me," said the son of the richest man in town. Richard Anderson hit the brakes of his imported Cadillac when his son Michael pointed out the window. The 8-year-old pressed his face against the glass, watching 2 children sleeping on an old mattress beside dumpsters. "Dad, stop the car. I want to see them up close," Michael asked, already unbuckling his seatbelt. "Michael, we can't stop here. Your mom is waiting at home." Richard tried to speed up, but traffic was congested on the main avenue of New York City. "But Dad, they look like me. Look at the boy's hair and the girl's eyes. They're just like mine," Michael insisted, pointing again. Richard glanced in the direction and felt a tightness in his chest. The 2 children, who looked about 6 to 9 years old, really did share physical traits with his son. The younger boy had the same wavy brown hair, while the girl had the same rare green eyes that ran in the Anderson family for generations. "It's just a coincidence, son. Now sit properly. We're leaving." Richard forced authority into his voice, but his hands trembled on the wheel. "It's not a coincidence, Dad. They're different from all the other kids we see on the street. Please, just 5 minutes." Michael already had his hand on the door handle. The most powerful businessman in New York City, owner of a supermarket chain spread across the state, found himself giving in to his son's persistence. He parked the car nearby, watching the street activity. It was a neighborhood he knew all too well, close to where he'd lived in his youth. 5 minutes, Michael, and you stay by my side," Richard conceded, stepping out reluctantly. The 2 children were awake as they approached. The girl, clearly the older one, stood protectively in front of her younger brother. Her green eyes gleamed with suspicion as she saw the 2 men in suits approaching. "Hi, I'm Michael," the boy said, pulling a pack of cookies from his school bag. "Do you want some? My mom always packs more food than I can eat." The girl hesitated, but her brother's stomach growled loudly. She took the pack carefully, as if afraid it was a trick. "Thank you," she murmured, opening the cookies and giving the first to her brother. "What are your names?" Michael asked, sitting on the ground beside them, ignoring his expensive suit. "I'm Emma and he's Jacob," the girl replied, still eyeing Richard warily. "Are you from social services?" "No, my dad's a businessman. We own supermarkets," Michael explained proudly. "Where are your parents?" Emma lowered her eyes and hugged her brother tighter. Jacob, who looked about 6, coughed weakly before answering, "Our mum went to work far away. She'll be back soon." Richard watched the scene with a lump in his throat. The resemblance between the children and his son was unsettling, especially Jacob, who, besides the wavy hair, had the same face shape and even a small birthmark on his chin, identical to Michael's. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. "Michael, it's time to go," Richard interrupted, reaching for his son. "Just a little longer, Dad. Jacob was telling me they live with their grandma." Michael turned to the children. "Where's your grandma?" "She's working too," Emma answered quickly, but Richard caught the lie in her tone. "Come on, Michael. Your mom's worried," Richard insisted, taking his son by the arm. On the way home, Michael wouldn't stop talking about Emma and Jacob. He described details Richard would rather not have heard: how Jacob coughed a lot, how Emma protected her brother, how they seemed not to have bathed in days. "Dad, can we bring them food tomorrow?" Michael asked as they reached the gate of the mansion in Scarsdale. "We'll see, son," Richard replied, but his mind was elsewhere. Jennifer, his wife of 10 years, greeted them at the door. A poised 42-year-old woman, heiress to a traditional family of landowners, she immediately sensed something was wrong. "Why did you take so long?" she asked, kissing Michael's forehead. "Dad stopped so I could talk to 2 kids who look like me," Michael said excitedly. "They don't have a home and sleep on the street. Can I bring them food tomorrow, Mom?" Jennifer looked at Richard for an explanation, but he averted his gaze. During dinner, he tried to change the subject several times, but Michael was fixated on the children he'd met. "Dad, did you see how Emma's eyes are just like mine? And Jacob even has that little mark on his chin, like me." Michael pointed to his own birthmark. Richard choked on his water and began coughing. Jennifer patted his back, concerned. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked. "Just went down the wrong way," Richard lied, avoiding his wife's curious stare. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, remembering details he wished he could forget. The area where they'd found the children was near Greenwich Village, where he'd lived as a young man. It was there he'd met Sarah, his first serious girlfriend. Sarah Mitchell, a 20-year-old education student, daughter of a seamstress and a mechanic. They'd met in an English class and dated for 3 years. Richard was still building his first business then, a small grocery store inherited from his grandfather. Their relationship was intense, full of shared dreams. They talked about marriage, children, building a life together. But when Richard met Jennifer at a business event, everything changed. Jennifer represented everything he thought he needed: connections, money, social status. He broke up with Sarah over the phone like a coward, said he needed to focus on business, that he wasn't ready for serious commitments. 2 weeks later, he was dating Jennifer. 6 months after that, they married in a lavish ceremony that opened doors for Richard in the business world. He never heard from Sarah again. He'd tried not to think of her all these years, focusing on building his business empire and being a good husband and father. But now, seeing those children, a terrible suspicion grew in his chest. The next morning, Richard woke early and called Robert, his driver and trusted confidant of 15 years. "Robert, I need you to do some discreet research for me," he said, handing him a paper with the address where they'd found the children. "Of course, Mr. Anderson, what would you like to know?" "I need information about 2 children living in that area, a girl around 9 named Emma and a 6-year-old boy named Jacob. Find out where they live, who they're with, how long they've been on the streets." "May I ask why the interest, sir?" Richard hesitated. Robert was more than an employee, he was practically family, but this matter was too delicate. "Michael was very taken with them yesterday. I'm thinking of helping in some way," he half lied. Meanwhile, Michael kept insisting they return to where they'd found the children. At breakfast, he spoke of nothing else. "Mom, can I bring some toys for Emma and Jacob? I have so many I don't even use them all," he asked between bites of pancakes. "Michael, you can't get involved with just anyone on the street," Jennifer tried to explain gently. "There are organizations that handle these situations." "But Mom, they're different. They look like me. Daddy saw it too, didn't you, Dad?" Richard nearly choked on his coffee. "Yeah, they're just like any other kids, Michael." "No, they're not, Dad. You saw Emma's green eyes. The teacher said green eyes are rare." "And Jacob has the same little mark as me," Michael insisted. Jennifer looked from Richard to Michael, starting to connect the dots. Green eyes were indeed a striking trait in the Anderson family. Richard himself, his father, and his grandfather all had green eyes. It was almost a genetic signature. "What kind of help are you thinking of giving those children?" Jennifer asked Richard, watching his reaction. "I don't know yet. Maybe donating some things, talking to an organization," Richard replied evasively. That afternoon, Robert returned with information that made Richard's blood run cold. The children lived with their maternal grandmother, Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell, in a small shack in the South Bronx slum. The grandmother was sick, suffering from severe respiratory problems and could barely work. The last name Mitchell confirmed Richard's suspicions. Dorothy was Sarah's mother. The children were her grandchildren. And if they had the physical traits of the Andersons, there was only one possible explanation. "Mr. Richard, there's something else," Robert continued. "Mrs. Dorothy's daughter, a woman named Sarah, disappeared about 2 years ago. She left the children with her mother and never came back." Richard felt the world spin around him. Sarah had vanished. The children were fatherless and now motherless too, and everything pointed to him being their biological father. "Did you find out anything else about this Sarah?" "The neighbors say she worked as a maid but never talked about the children's father. She always said they didn't need a father, that she could handle everything alone." Richard dismissed Robert and stayed alone in his office, trying to process the information. If his suspicions were correct, he had left Sarah pregnant without even knowing. She had raised the children alone for years, until hardship made her disappear. The guilt was crushing. While he built his empire and lived a life of luxury, his children went hungry on the streets. While he gave Michael everything, Emma and Jacob slept on cardboard. That night, Richard couldn't eat. Jennifer noticed his agitation and confronted him in the bedroom. "Richard, what's going on? You've been acting strange since yesterday. Does it have to do with those children?" It's complicated, Jennifer. I'd rather not talk about it now. Not talk about what? She insisted. Richard, we've been married for 10 years. I know you. I can tell when something's bothering you. Richard knew he couldn't hide the truth for long. Jennifer was smart and observant. Sooner or later she'd find out. I think, he began, then stopped. I think those children might be my kids. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer turned pale, sitting on the bed as if her legs could no longer hold her. What do you mean, your kids? She asked, her voice trembling. Richard told her about Sarah, about the relationship they'd had in their youth, about how it ended so he could marry Jennifer. He explained the physical similarities between the children and Michael, the last name Mitchell, Sarah's disappearance. You're telling me you have 2 children living on the streets and never said a word? Jennifer was visibly shaken. I didn't know, Jennifer. I swear I didn't. If Sarah was pregnant when we broke up, she never told me. And you never bothered to find out? Never cared about the consequences of your actions? Richard hung his head. There was no defense for his past actions. He had been selfish and cowardly. What are you going to do now? Jennifer asked after a long silence. I don't know. First I need to be sure, then I don't know. Are you sure? Richard, you saw the children. They're just like Michael. What more proof do you need? The next morning, Michael woke up even more determined to help Emma and Jacob. During breakfast, he announced he'd set aside some toys and clothes for them. Dad, can we go there today? I promised Emma I'd come back. Richard looked at Jennifer, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She'd spent the night thinking and reached a conclusion. You can go, Michael, but now we're all going together, Jennifer said, surprising her husband. Are you sure? Richard asked quietly. I am. If they're your daughters, they're Michael's sisters, and if they're my son's sisters, they're part of our family. Jennifer's generosity and maturity impressed Richard. He knew he didn't deserve a woman like her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. When they arrived at the spot where they'd found the children, they weren't there. Richard felt a tightness in his chest, fearing something had happened to them. Let's look around the area, Jennifer suggested. They found Emma and Jacob 2 blocks away, rummaging through trash bins for food. When Michael saw them, he ran toward them with a bag full of gifts. Emma, Jacob, I brought things for you, he shouted excitedly. The children smiled when they saw Michael, but tensed up when they noticed Richard and Jennifer approaching. Emma pulled Jacob behind her again. You don't need to be afraid, Jennifer said, crouching to their level. I'm Michael's mother. He wouldn't stop talking about you. We brought food too, Michael added, showing another bag. And clean clothes. Jacob looked at Emma, clearly hungry, but waiting for his sister's approval. Emma hesitated, but the smell of food was too tempting. Thank you, she murmured, accepting the bag. Shouldn't you be in school? Jennifer asked gently. We were going. But Grandma got sick this morning, Jacob answered innocently, before Emma elbowed him. Where is your grandma now? Richard asked, trying to keep his voice calm. At home, Emma replied curtly. Can we meet her? Jennifer insisted. Maybe we can help if she's sick. Emma and Jacob exchanged glances. It was obvious they were trying to decide whether to trust these strangers. Our grandma doesn't like strangers, Emma finally said. We're not strangers, Michael said. We're friends. Look, you don't know me, but I'd really like to help, Jennifer continued. I have a son your age, and I know how important it is to have a safe place to live and food on the table. Something in Jennifer's sincerity touched Emma. The 9-year-old girl carried responsibilities far too heavy for her age. She was tired of protecting her brother alone, tired of lying about their situation. Our grandma is very sick, she finally admitted. She coughs a lot, and sometimes there's blood. We're scared. Richard and Jennifer exchanged worried looks. The situation was even worse than they'd imagined. Would you like a doctor to come see your grandma? Jennifer offered. I know a very good doctor who can help. You'd really do that? Jacob asked, wide-eyed. Of course, Richard replied, speaking directly to the children for the first time. Can you take us to her? The walk to the Mitchell family's shack was a painful journey for Richard. Each step took him deeper into the reality of poverty he'd ignored for years. The streets grew increasingly run down, the shacks more cramped. Michael held Jacob's hand, chatting excitedly, oblivious to the social differences. To him, Jacob was simply a new friend. Jennifer walked beside Emma, asking careful questions about their lives. "Did your mother really go to work far away?" Jennifer asked gently. Emma stopped walking and looked at Jennifer with tears in her eyes. "My mother left a long time ago. Grandma said she'd come back, but I know she won't." Mothers don't abandon their children unless they have no choice. The maturity and pain in Emma's voice broke Jennifer's heart. She pulled the girl into a spontaneous hug. "Sometimes mothers make hard choices because they think it's best for their children," Jennifer murmured. "That doesn't mean they don't love you." Richard watched the scene with tears in his eyes. If his suspicions were correct, Sarah had made the hardest choice of all, leaving her children in hopes of giving them a better life. When they reached the shack, the smell of medicine and sickness was unmistakable. Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell lay on a makeshift bed, coughing violently. She was a 68-year-old woman who looked 80. "Grandma, we brought visitors," Emma announced hesitantly. Dorothy lifted her eyes and nearly fainted when she saw Richard. Even after so many years, she recognized him instantly. Her face twisted into a mix of anger and despair. "You," she managed between coughs. "What are you doing here?" Richard stepped forward slowly, confirming his worst fears. Dorothy was indeed Sarah's mother. "Mrs. Dorothy, he began, but she cut him off. "Get out! You have no right to be in my home," she shouted, triggering an even more violent coughing fit. Emma and Jacob looked confused. Jennifer moved closer to Dorothy, ignoring the hostility. "Ma'am, I'm a doctor. May I examine you?" Jennifer lied, relying on her basic first aid knowledge. "Grandma, they came to help." Emma tried to calm her. "Help?" Dorothy laughed bitterly. "This man ruined my daughter's life. Now he wants to help." Michael looked at his father in confusion. "Dad, how do you know their grandma?" Richard knelt beside Dorothy's bed, ignoring the children. "Mrs. Dorothy, I didn't know. If Sarah was pregnant when we broke up, she never told me. I swear I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," she spat. "You were too busy marrying that rich girl to care about the consequences of your actions." "Grandma, what are you talking about?" Emma asked, clearly frightened. Dorothy looked at the children, and her expression softened. She realized she'd said too much in front of them. "Nothing, sweetheart, just old stories." "Mrs. Dorothy," Jennifer gently intervened. "May we speak privately? The children can play outside with Michael while we talk." Dorothy hesitated, but another coughing fit overwhelmed her. She was clearly very ill and needed urgent medical attention. "Emma, take Jacob and Michael to play in the yard," she said weakly. "But Grandma..." Emma protested. "Go, sweetheart, everything will be fine." When the children left, Dorothy turned to Richard with all the resentment she'd carried for years. "Sarah found out she was pregnant a week after you left her," she began. "She thought about telling you, but when she heard you were getting married, she decided to stay silent. Why didn't she tell me? I would have taken responsibility," Richard protested. "Responsibility?" Dorothy laughed bitterly. "You left her to marry an heiress. You think she wanted scraps from your guilty conscience?" Richard bowed his head. Dorothy was right. Back then, he likely would have offered money but wouldn't have changed his wedding plans. "Sarah worked through her entire pregnancy," Dorothy continued. "Delivered twins alone because I was working. Raised them those first years, cleaning houses, doing odd jobs, selling sweets on the street." "Twins," Richard murmured. Emma and Jacob were twins. That explained the height difference between them, though they were roughly the same age. "When the children turned 4, I got sick for the first time. Sarah had to stop working to take care of me. The money ran out, we lost the house we were renting, and we ended up here." Dorothy gestured around the shabby shack. "Where is Sarah now?" Jennifer asked gently. Dorothy hesitated, looking from Richard to Jennifer. "Sarah got a job in New York City as a nanny for a wealthy family. They moved abroad and took her with them. She sends money when she can, but it's never enough." She abandoned her children to work as a nanny? Richard couldn't hide the judgment in his voice. "Don't you dare judge my daughter," Dorothy snapped. "She did what she had to do to survive. The family promised that after 2 years, she could bring the children." Sarah agreed because it was the only chance to give them a better future. Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Sarah had sacrificed herself for her children. She'd chosen to stay away from them in the hope of earning enough to lift them out of poverty. "When was the last time you spoke to her?" Jennifer asked. Dorothy began to cry. 6 months ago. She stopped sending money, stopped calling. I think something happened to her." The despair in the elderly woman's voice was palpable. She was sick, broke, caring for 2 children alone and hadn't heard from her daughter in half a year. "Do Emma and Jacob know?" Richard asked. "They know their mother went away to work and that she'll come back. I couldn't bring myself to tell them. She might have—" Dorothy couldn't finish the sentence. Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed and took Dorothy's hand. "We'll help. I'll arrange a doctor to care for you, and we'll look for Sarah." "Why would you do that?" Dorothy asked suspiciously. "Because the children deserve it," Jennifer replied simply, "and because it's the right thing to do." Richard looked at his wife with renewed admiration. Jennifer was being more generous than he deserved. "Mrs. Dorothy," Richard stepped closer again, "I know I have no right to ask anything, but can I do a DNA test to confirm if I'm their father?" "Why?" she asked bitterly. "So you can convince yourself to help. Look at them, Richard. They're your daughters. Anyone with eyes can see that." "I need to be sure to do things right," Richard explained. "Do things right?" Dorothy laughed mockingly. "You had 9 years to do things right." Just then, the children came back inside the shack. Michael was excited, telling Emma and Jacob about his house, his school, his toys. The social differences were stark, but the 3 children had connected genuinely. "Dad, can I invite Emma and Jacob to have lunch at our house?" Michael asked innocently. Richard looked at Dorothy, who gave a weak nod. "They can go, but be back before dark," she told Emma and Jacob. "You're invited too," Jennifer offered. "I can't leave here," Dorothy refused, "but thank you." The drive back to Scarsdale was tense. Emma and Jacob were awed by the luxury car, but also intimidated. Michael tried to put them at ease, explaining everything they saw out the window. "Our house is really big," Michael warned, "but you can go anywhere." When they arrived at the mansion, Emma and Jacob's jaws dropped. The gap between the shack they lived in and this house was staggering. "You really live here?" Jacob asked in awe. "It's our home," Michael replied naturally. "Now it's yours too." Jennifer took the children to bathe and dressed them in clean clothes. By the time they came down for lunch, they were unrecognizable. Emma was a beautiful girl with shiny brown hair and green eyes that looked even more striking when clean. Jacob looked just like Michael's twin brother. During lunch, Richard watched the children carefully. Every gesture, every expression, every mannerism confirmed his fatherhood. Jacob tilted his head the same way when he was thinking. Emma had the same shy smile Richard used to have as a child. "Do you like school?" Jennifer asked. "I love it," Emma replied. "I want to be a teacher just like my mom wanted to be." "What about you, Jacob?" "I like math. I'm good with numbers," the boy answered proudly. Richard smiled. He had always been good with numbers too. It was a talent that had clearly passed down to his son. "Does your school have a library?" Michael asked. Emma lowered her eyes. "We're not in school right now. Grandma didn't have money for supplies." The silence that followed was awkward. Michael couldn't understand how someone might not have money for school supplies. To him, those things had always been there. "Tomorrow, we'll buy everything you need," Jennifer said naturally. "And we'll enroll you in a good school." "The same school I go to," Michael perked up. "That way we can go together every day." "We don't know if we can accept that," Emma said maturely. "Grandma always taught us not to take charity." "It's not charity," Richard said softly. "It's responsibility." Emma looked at him curiously. There was something in the way he spoke that intrigued her. After lunch, Richard called his private doctor. Dr. Henry Williams was a renowned general practitioner who had cared for the Anderson family for years. "Doctor, I need you to make an urgent house call, Richard explained. It's an elderly woman with severe respiratory problems. Of course, Richard. Can you give me the address? When Richard gave the address in the South Bronx, the doctor hesitated. Richard, are you sure you want me to go there? Normally, I'd recommend taking the patient to the hospital. I'm sure, doctor. And I need you to treat her as you would any member of my family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. That afternoon, Richard accompanied Dr. Henry to Dorothy's shack. The children stayed home with Jennifer, playing in the garden as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Dorothy was worse when they arrived. Her cough had worsened and she could barely sit up. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Henry. I'm here to examine you. The doctor introduced himself professionally. Doctor, I don't have money to pay for a visit, Dorothy murmured. Don't worry about that now. Let's focus on your health first. The examination revealed what Richard had feared. Dorothy had advanced pneumonia and needed immediate hospitalization. She'll need to stay in the hospital for at least a week, Dr. Henry explained, and she'll need expensive medication for treatment. Do whatever's necessary, Richard said without hesitation. Money isn't an issue. But the children, Dorothy protested weakly. Who will take care of them? We will, Richard replied. They can stay at our house until you recover. I can't accept that. Dorothy tried to sit up but was too weak. Mrs. Dorothy, Richard knelt beside the bed again. Please let me help. Not for you, but for the children. They need you healthy. Dorothy looked at Richard for a long moment, then she sighed deeply. There's something I need to tell you before I go to the hospital, she said. About Sarah. Richard braced himself for more painful revelations. Sarah isn't working abroad, Dorothy confessed. She's in jail. Jail? Richard was shocked. Why? She was working for a family but discovered they were abusing a child. Sarah reported it to the authorities, but the family had important connections. They managed to turn the situation around and accused Sarah of theft. Richard felt anger rising in his chest. Sarah had tried to protect a child and was punished for it. Where is she being held? In a prison outside New York City. She was sentenced to 2 years but has already been there for 8 months. Dorothy began to cry. The children don't know. I told them she was working because I didn't want them to lose hope. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Richard asked. Come to you? Dorothy laughed bitterly. For what? So you could throw us some charity while living your perfect life? Sarah made me promise never to tell the children who their father is. But now I'm sick and have no choice, she finished. The children need someone to care for them. And as much as I hate you for what you did to my daughter, I know you can give them what I can't. Richard knew he had to tell Emma and Jacob the truth. They had the right to know who he was. But he also knew it would devastate them to learn about their mother. Mrs. Dorothy, what do you want me to tell them? The truth, she said simply. They're smart. They deserve the truth. As Dorothy was transferred to the private hospital, Richard returned home with a heavy heart. Jennifer was in the garden with the 3 children, who were playing tag as if they'd been siblings for years. How is she? Jennifer asked when Richard approached. Hospitalized. Severe pneumonia, he replied quietly. And there's more. I need to talk to you. Jennifer called the maid to watch the children and took Richard inside. When he told her Sarah was in jail, Jennifer was shocked. My God, Richard, these children have lost everything. Their mother, their home. Now their grandmother is sick. I have to tell them the truth, Richard said. About Sarah, about me being their father. Do you think they're ready to hear that? I don't know if anyone is ready to hear that their father abandoned their pregnant mother and that their mother is wrongly imprisoned, Richard answered bitterly. That night after dinner, Richard asked to speak with Emma and Jacob. Michael stayed too, since he was part of the family. Kids, I need to tell you some important things, Richard began, sitting on the living room couch. Emma, always perceptive, sensed the seriousness of the moment. It's about our mother, isn't it? Richard took a deep breath. Yes, among other things. "She's not coming back," Emma said flatly. "I already knew." "Emma," Richard started, but she interrupted him. "Grandma cried every night when she thought I didn't know, but I heard her. Our mother isn't coming back, is she?" Richard looked at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "Your mother is alive," he said clearly, "but she can't come back now because she's in jail." Jacob began to cry. Michael took his new friend's hand, trying to comfort him. "Why is she in jail?" Emma asked, keeping her composure. "Because she tried to protect a child who was being abused. Bad people managed to blame her for something she didn't do." "That's unfair," Michael exclaimed indignantly. "It's very unfair," Richard agreed. "And there's one more thing you need to know." Emma looked him straight in the eyes. "You're our father, aren't you?" The silence that followed was profound. Richard was stunned by the girl's perception. "How did you know?" he asked. "I have eyes. Jacob looks just like Michael. And today, when you talked to Grandma, she was really angry. People only get that mad when someone who was supposed to take care of them didn't." Richard felt tears streaming down his face. "Yes, Emma, I am your father. And I'm so sorry I haven't been there for you until now." Jacob stopped crying and looked at Richard in confusion. "If you're our father, why did you live so far away?" "Because I made the wrong choices when I was young," Richard explained. "I didn't know you existed, but that doesn't excuse me. I should have been there for you and your mother." "And now?" Emma asked. "What's going to happen to us?" "Now you'll live here with us," Jennifer intervened. "You're Michael's siblings, you're part of our family." "And our mother?" Jacob asked hopefully. "We'll do everything possible to get her out of prison," Richard promised. "I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll move mountains if I have to." Michael, who had been silently listening to the whole conversation, finally spoke. "So Emma and Jacob are really my brother and sister, for real?" "Yes, my son," Richard confirmed. "That's so cool." Michael perked up. "I always wanted siblings." The ease with which Michael accepted the situation helped Emma and Jacob feel more at ease. For them, Michael had been the first to show genuine affection in a long time. In the days that followed, the Anderson family's routine changed completely. Emma and Jacob were enrolled in the same private school as Michael. Richard hired a tutor to help them catch up on their studies. Jennifer turned out to be an extraordinary mother to Emma. The girl, who had grown up too fast because of her circumstances, could finally be a child again. Jennifer taught her about things she'd never experienced before: makeup, pretty clothes, music, movies. Jacob adapted more easily. He and Michael became truly inseparable. They played together, studied together, even shared a room. It was as if they were twins separated at birth. Richard, for his part, tried to make up for 9 years of absence. He took the kids out, helped with homework, attended every school event. But he knew it would take a long time to earn Emma's full trust. The girl was polite and affectionate, but Richard could tell she still kept an emotional distance. She had learned not to fully trust adults, and Richard understood he'd have to prove himself worthy of her trust. Dorothy recovered after 2 weeks in the hospital. When she was discharged, Richard offered her a home in a better neighborhood, but she refused. "I don't want your charity," she said coldly. "It's not charity, Mrs. Dorothy. You're my children's grandmother, your family." "Family?" She laughed bitterly. Where was this family when Sarah needed help? Richard knew Dorothy would never fully forgive him, and he accepted that. But he managed to convince her to take a modest apartment near his home so she could visit the children regularly. Meanwhile, Richard hired the best criminal defense firm in New York City to handle Sarah's case. The lawyers dug deep and uncovered irregularities in the trial that had convicted her. Mr. Anderson, Dr. Frank Thompson, the lead attorney, explained, "Sarah's case was clearly manipulated. We have evidence that witnesses were bribed and evidence was fabricated." "How long to overturn the conviction?" Richard asked. "If all goes well, 3 to 6 months, but it'll be a complicated process. The family that accused her has a lot of power." "I don't care about the cost or the difficulties. I want Sarah free." 3 months later, Richard got a call that changed everything. "Mr. Anderson, we did it." Dr. Frank was ecstatic on the phone. Sarah's conviction has been overturned. She'll be released tomorrow. Richard could hardly believe it. He rushed to tell the kids, who were doing homework in the living room. "Emma, Jacob, I have news," he shouted excitedly. "What is it, Dad?" Jacob had already started calling Richard Dad, naturally. "Your mother is being released tomorrow. The lawyers proved her innocence." Emma dropped her pencil and looked at Richard with tears in her eyes. "Is it true? Is our mother coming back?" "It's true, my dear. Tomorrow." Jacob began crying with joy and ran to hug Richard. Emma hesitated for a moment, but then joined the embrace. "Thank you," she whispered in Richard's ear. "Thank you for bringing our mother back." "I promised I'd do everything possible," Richard replied, moved. That night, no one could sleep from anticipation. Michael was almost as excited as Emma and Jacob to meet Sarah. "What do you think she'll be like?" Michael asked, as the three siblings talked in the bedroom. "Our mother is the kindest person in the world," Emma answered. "She sang us to sleep, told us stories, made delicious food even when we had almost nothing." "Will she like me?" Michael asked uncertainly. "Of course," Jacob assured him. "You're our brother. She'll love you too." The next morning, the whole family went to pick up Sarah from the prison. Richard was more nervous than ever. He didn't know how their reunion would be after so many years and everything that had happened. When Sarah appeared at the prison door, Richard felt his heart stop. She was thinner, with a few grey strands in her brown hair, but she was still the woman he had fallen in love with in his youth. Emma and Jacob ran to hug their mother, crying with joy. Sarah also wept, kissing her children as if she couldn't believe they were really there. "My babies, how you've grown," she murmured, holding them close. When Sarah looked up and saw Richard, her expression changed. It wasn't anger, but it wasn't joy either. It was a mix of pain, sorrow, and perhaps gratitude. "Sarah," Richard said softly, stepping forward. "Richard," she replied, still holding the children. "Mom, he's our dad," Jacob said excitedly, "and now we live in a really big house, and I have a brother who's almost my twin." Sarah looked at Michael, who was holding Jennifer's hand. The boy stepped forward timidly. "Hi, Aunt Sarah. I'm Michael. Jacob and Emma are my best friends now." Sarah knelt to meet Michael's height and smiled for the first time. "Hi, Michael. It's so nice to meet you. Emma and Jacob wrote a lot about you in their letters." Richard had arranged for the children to write to Sarah over the past few months through the lawyers. The ride home was tense. Sarah sat in the back with the three children, who wouldn't stop talking and asking questions. She answered warmly, but Richard could tell she was holding back emotionally. When they arrived at the mansion, Sarah was impressed but visibly uncomfortable. "Mom, come see our room." Emma pulled Sarah by the hand. Richard had prepared separate rooms for Emma and Jacob, but they had asked to sleep in the same room for the first few months to feel safer. "Is all this really ours?" Sarah asked, looking at the well-decorated room full of toys. "It's our home now, Mom," Emma said. "Dad, Richard took really good care of us." Sarah noticed Emma called Richard Dad, but didn't comment. At lunch, Sarah was formally introduced to Jennifer. The two women greeted each other politely, but the tension was palpable. "Sarah, I want you to know the children are very welcome here," Jennifer said sincerely. "They've become part of our family." "I appreciate everything you've done for them," Sarah replied formally. "But now that I'm free, I can take care of them myself." Richard felt his heart tighten. He had feared that Sarah would want to take the children away. "Mum, we want to stay here," Emma said softly. "This is our home now, and Michael is our brother." "You don't understand," Sarah tried to explain. "I can get a job, rent a house." "Sarah," Richard intervened, "please don't do this to the children. They've been through so much already. Don't make them choose between us." "I'm not making them choose," Sarah replied defensively. "I'm their mother. They belong with me." "No one's questioning that," Jennifer said gently. "But why not stay here too? This house is big enough for all of us." Sarah looked from Jennifer to Richard, clearly suspicious. "You think I'll accept charity after everything that's happened?" "It's not charity," Richard said firmly. "You're the mother of my children. That gives you rights here." "Rights?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "What rights?" Where were those rights when I was raising your kids alone in poverty? The children grew uneasy with the tension between the adults. Michael moved closer to Jacob, who was visibly distressed. "Mum, please," Emma interjected. "Don't fight. We just want everyone to stay together." Sarah looked at her daughter and realized she was scaring the children. She took a deep breath and calmed herself. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy's just still confused." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Sarah asked to speak with Richard in the garden. "Why are you doing this?" she asked directly. "Doing what?" "Taking care of them, spending a fortune on lawyers to get me out of prison. Why?" Richard thought carefully before answering. "Because they're my children. Because I should have been there from the start. Because you didn't deserve to go through all that alone." "You married someone else 2 weeks after breaking up with me," Sarah reminded him bitterly. "Don't tell me you cared." "You're right. Back then I was young and selfish. All I cared about was climbing the ladder, making money. I thought Jennifer was what I needed," Richard admitted. "But that doesn't mean I didn't love you." Sarah laughed mockingly. "Love? You call that love?" "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to do the right thing now." "The right thing would have been to come looking for me 9 years ago. You never told me you were pregnant," Richard snapped. "If I'd known..." "What, you'd have cancelled the wedding to the rich heiress?" Sarah challenged. "Would you have chosen the pregnant maid over the picture-perfect family?" Richard couldn't answer because he knew Sarah was right. Back then, he probably wouldn't have chosen her. "That's what I thought," Sarah said, seeing his silence. "Don't feed me sweet talk about love now." "Sarah, I've changed. These months taking care of Emma and Jacob have shown me what really matters in life. Money, status, business. None of it means anything if you don't have family to share it with." "How romantic," Sarah said sarcastically. "You discovered the importance of family after getting everything you wanted in life." Richard knew he deserved all of Sarah's hostility, but he had to try to explain his feelings. "You have every right to be angry with me. You can hate me for the rest of your life. But don't make the children pay for it. They're happy here. Michael loves them like sisters. Jennifer's become like a second mother to them." "And what about me?" Sarah asked, tears in her eyes. "Where do I fit into all this? Am I just the birth mother who shows up to ruin your perfect family?" "No." Richard stepped closer to her. "You're their mother. Nothing and no one can change that. I just want all of us to be a family." "A family?" Sarah stared at him. "You, me, your wife, and the kids? What kind of family is that?" "A complicated family, but one that works," Richard admitted. "Sarah, Jennifer knows about us, about our past. She accepted the situation because she loves the children. And I still have feelings for you." Sarah stayed silent for a long moment, processing Richard's words. "Do you think you can just show up in my life after 9 years and say you still have feelings for me?" she finally asked. "I don't expect you to feel the same. I'm just being honest about my feelings." "And your wife? Does she know you still have feelings for me?" Richard hesitated. "Jennifer is an incredible woman. She deserves honesty." "What a mess," Sarah murmured. "What a mess you've made of our lives." In the days that followed, Sarah tried to adjust to the new reality. Jennifer made sure to include her in all decisions about the children, showing respect for her role as their mother. "Sarah, Emma needs glasses," Jennifer informed her after an eye exam. "Would you like to help her pick out the frames?" "Of course," Sarah replied, surprised by Jennifer's deference. "And Jacob is struggling with English. Maybe you could help him with his homework." "You studied education, didn't you?" Sarah was touched that Jennifer remembered her background. "Yes, I can help." Slowly, a strange but functional dynamic settled into the household. Sarah took care of Emma and Jacob's education. Jennifer managed the daily routine. And Richard tried to balance his conflicted feelings for both women while dedicating himself to all 3 children. Michael was the bond that held them all together. He treated Sarah with genuine affection, calling her Aunt Sarah, and always asking her to tell stories about Emma and Jacob when they were babies. "Aunt Sarah, what was Jacob like when he was little?" Michael asked one night at dinner. "Jacob was very funny," Sarah smiled. allowing herself to remember happier times. He tried to eat with his hands but ended up making a mess, and Emma always tried to clean him up with her own food. The three children laughed at the story. Richard watched Sarah talk about their early years and felt a pang in his chest, thinking about all he had lost. After a month of living together, Sarah finally opened up to Jennifer. The two were alone in the kitchen, preparing the children's snacks. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" Sarah said hesitantly. "Of course." "Why are you being so kind to me? I'm your husband's ex-girlfriend, the mother of two children he didn't even know existed. Most women would hate me." Jennifer stopped cutting fruit and looked at Sarah. "At first I was angry, very angry. Not at you, but at the situation. At knowing Richard had a past that resulted in abandoned children," she explained honestly. "But when I met Emma and Jacob, when I saw what they'd been through, my anger turned into something else." "Into what?" "Responsibility. Those children didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to grow up in poverty. And you sacrificed everything for them. How could I hate you for that?" Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "I never wanted things to turn out this way. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought about telling Richard. But then he was marrying me," Jennifer finished. "And you had too much pride to beg." "Exactly. I thought I could raise them alone. For years I did. But when my mother got sick, you did what any mother would do. You tried to get money to give them a better life. And I ended up wrongly imprisoned?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "But now you're free, and you have a second chance to be happy." Sarah looked at Jennifer curiously. "A second chance with whom? Do you two expect me to be some kind of forever single aunt who takes care of the kids while you have your perfect family?" Jennifer took a deep breath. It was time to be completely honest. "Sarah, can I trust you with something only Richard knows?" "Of course." "My marriage to Richard isn't as perfect as it seems," Jennifer admitted. "We married for convenience. I needed stability after my father lost almost the entire family fortune in bad investments. Richard needed connections and social status." Sarah was surprised. "You don't love each other?" "We respect each other. We care for one another, but true love..." Jennifer shook her head. "I don't think Richard ever truly loved me. And I fell for someone else a few years ago." "Who?" "Dr. Frank, the lawyer who handled your case." Sarah's eyes widened. "Jennifer." "We never did anything inappropriate," Jennifer quickly explained. "But the feelings are there, and I think Richard still has feelings for you." "Then why don't you separate?" "Because of Michael. And now Emma and Jacob too. They need stability. They need a united family." Sarah fell silent, processing Jennifer's revelations. "What a complicated mess we've made," she murmured. "Yeah, but maybe we can find a solution that works for all of us." "What kind of solution?" Jennifer hesitated, as if about to suggest something crazy. What if we redefined what family means?" Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the children arrived home from school, loud and excited. The conversation had to end, but it lingered in both women's minds. That evening, Richard sought Sarah out in the garden again. It was his daily ritual to try talking to her, even though she usually kept her distance. "How was your day?" he asked, sitting on the bench beside her. "Confusing," Sarah answered honestly. "Jennifer told me some things that got me thinking." "About what?" "About us. About this strange family we've formed, about the future." Richard felt hope rise in his chest. "And what did you think?" "I thought maybe we could find a way to make it work." "Make what work?" "This life. The four of us adults raising the three kids together. No lies, no secrets, no resentment." Richard was stunned. "You could do that even after everything that happened?" "For the kids, maybe I could. They're happy, Richard. Happier than I've seen them in years. Michael loves them like real sisters. Jennifer is kind to them, and you're trying to be the father you should have been from the start." "What about us?" Richard asked cautiously. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you," Sarah said honestly, "but I can try. For our children." Richard felt tears of gratitude in his eyes. Sarah, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making up for lost time. Don't make promises, Richard. Just be the man these children deserve. In the following months, the unconventional Anderson family found their rhythm. Sarah got a job as an educational coordinator at a private school, a position Richard had secured through his connections, but one she kept on her own merit. Jennifer, meanwhile, began spending more time with Dr. Frank, always discreetly and respectfully. Richard noticed but said nothing. He knew he had no right to demand emotional exclusivity from a woman he'd married for convenience. The children thrived in this new dynamic. Emma excelled in school, especially in writing and literature. Jacob showed talent for math and science, just like Michael. The three were inseparable, yet each developed their own individuality. "Dad," Emma said one night at dinner, "can I enter the school's writing contest?" Richard smiled. She'd started calling him Dad naturally a few weeks ago. "Of course you can. What are you going to write about?" "About different kinds of families. The teacher said family doesn't have to be like what we see in movies." Sarah and Jennifer exchanged meaningful glances. The wisdom of children sometimes surprised adults. "And what will you say about different families?" Jennifer asked curiously. "I'll talk about our family," Emma answered simply. "About how love isn't about blood or papers, but about choice. Like how my mom is my mom, but Jennifer is also important to me. How Richard is my dad, but Michael is also my brother, even though we have different moms." Richard felt emotion wash over him. Emma, at 9 years old, had understood something many adults spend a lifetime figuring out. "I think you're going to win this contest," Michael said proudly. "And if I win, I'll dedicate the prize to our crazy family," Emma smiled. Everyone laughed, including Sarah. It was the first time in months she had laughed genuinely. 6 months after Sarah's return, the family received an unexpected visit. Mrs. Dorothy showed up unannounced, wearing a new dress and looking healthier than she had in a long time. "Grandma!" Emma and Jacob ran to hug her. "My dear grandchildren, look how big you've gotten." Richard and Sarah approached. Dorothy looked at Richard with less hostility than usual. "Richard," she greeted formally. "Mrs. Dorothy, how are you feeling?" "Better, much better. I came here to talk to you all." During afternoon coffee, Dorothy observed the family's dynamics closely. She saw how the children interacted, how the adults behaved, how everyone seemed genuinely happy. "Sarah," she called her daughter aside, "can I talk to you?" "Of course, Mom." "Are you happy here?" Sarah hesitated. "I'm at peace, Mom. The kids are doing well. That's what matters." "And you? What matters to you?" "The kids are what matter to me." "Sarah, you're still young. You have the right to be happy, to have your own dreams." "Mom, I tried following my dreams, and look where that got me. I almost lost my children." "You didn't lose them because you were strong and fought for them. Now they're safe. You can start living for yourself, too." That night, after Dorothy left, Sarah kept thinking about her mother's words. Did she really have the right to pursue her own happiness? She looked out the window and saw Richard playing in the garden with the 3 kids. Jennifer was on the phone, probably talking to Dr. Frank, with a smile on her face. Everyone seemed to have found their place in this new family dynamic, except her. "Sarah," Jennifer appeared behind her. "Everything okay?" "Jennifer, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Are you happy?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "I'm content. It's different from happy, but it's not bad." "And don't you miss having a family of your own? A husband who truly loves you?" "Sometimes," Jennifer admitted. "But I've learned that family isn't just about romantic love. It's about choosing to care for each other." "What if you could have both family and romantic love?" Jennifer looked at Sarah curiously. "Why are you asking this?" "Because I've been thinking about everything you've told me about redefining family." Before Jennifer could answer, Michael came running in. "Aunt Sarah, come play with us. Dad's pretending to be a dragon." Sarah smiled and followed Michael to the garden, but the questions kept echoing in her mind. A week later, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone. At dinner, she announced, "I've decided to enroll to finish my teaching degree." "That's great, Mom," Emma cheered. but I'll be taking night classes at NYU. It means I'll come home late some nights. We can help with anything you need, Jennifer offered immediately. Thank you. And there's one more thing. Sarah took a deep breath. I met someone. The silence that followed was awkward. Richard stopped chewing, Jennifer widened her eyes, and the children looked confused. Met how? Emma asked innocently. He's a teacher at the school where I work. He invited me to dinner. And you're going? Jacob asked. I'd like to, if you all don't mind. Michael was the first to react. Of course we don't mind. You deserve to be happy, Aunt Sarah. Emma and Jacob nodded, though still a little confused. Richard stayed silent, clearly uncomfortable. What's his name? Jennifer asked, trying to keep her tone casual. David, history teacher. He's very kind. After dinner, Richard asked to speak with Sarah privately. Are you sure about this teacher? He asked, trying to hide the jealousy in his voice. I have the right to meet other people, Richard. Of course you do. I just want to make sure he's a good person. The kids will be around him. The kids are around lots of people. They're around Jennifer, Dr. Frank. Dr. Frank? Richard was confused. Sarah realized she'd said too much. Forget it. Sarah, what about Dr. Frank? Ask your wife, Sarah said, walking into the house. Richard stood in the garden, processing the information. Dr. Frank? The lawyer who had freed Sarah? What did he have to do with Jennifer? That night, Richard confronted Jennifer in their bedroom. Jennifer, I need to ask you something. What is it? What's going on with Dr. Frank? Jennifer turned pale. What do you mean? Sarah mentioned his name in a suspicious way. Jennifer sighed. She knew this moment would come eventually. Richard, we need to talk. About what? About us. About our marriage. About the future. Jennifer, are you having an affair with Dr. Frank? No, she answered quickly. I've never cheated on you, Richard, but what? But I've fallen in love with him. Richard sat on the bed, feeling as if he'd been punched. So now what? He asked. Now we need to decide what to do with this information. Do you want to separate? I want to be honest. With you, with myself, with everyone. These past few months have shown me that love can take different forms. I love you, Richard, but as a partner, as the father of our children, not the way a woman loves a man. And you love Frank that way? Yes, Jennifer admitted softly. Richard stayed silent for a long time. Then he laughed quietly. What irony, he murmured. What's ironic? I've also fallen in love again. With Sarah? With Sarah. Again. Or maybe I never stopped loving her. And now she's seeing another man. Exactly. The two sat on the bed, each lost in their own thoughts. Richard, Jennifer finally said, what if we stopped pretending? What do you mean? What if we admitted our marriage was an alliance that served its purpose? But now we can be honest about our feelings. Are you suggesting we separate? I'm suggesting we redefine our relationship, that we stay partners in raising the kids, but allow ourselves to seek romantic happiness with others. Richard considered Jennifer's proposal. It was radical, but perhaps the most honest solution. What about the kids? They already live in an unconventional family. Michael has two siblings who aren't his mother's biological children. Emma and Jacob have two maternal figures. They've adapted well so far. Do you think they'd understand if we rearranged things? I think they want everyone to be happy, and kids are more flexible than adults. The next morning, Richard approached Sarah before she left for work. Sarah, about last night. Richard, let's not discuss this. You have no right to question my personal choices. You're right, but I need to tell you something. What? Jennifer and I are going to separate. Sarah was surprised. Why? Because we've discovered we're in love with other people. Other people? Jennifer is in love with Dr. Frank, and I'm still in love with you. Sarah was speechless. Richard, I'm not asking anything of you. I'm just being honest. You have every right to get to know that professor, to build a new life. I just wanted you to know how I feel. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've learned that hiding feelings only brings pain. I spent 9 years hiding what I felt for you, and look how that turned out. Sarah looked at Richard for a long moment. Then she sighed. Richard, I need time to process all this. Take all the time you need. And you need to talk to the kids. They deserve to know what's happening. That night, Richard and Jennifer gathered the 3 children in the living room for an important conversation. Kids, we need to talk to you about some changes, Richard began. What kind of changes? Emma asked, always the most perceptive. Changes in our family, Jennifer replied. You know families can come in different shapes, right? Yeah, Michael answered. Ours is already different. Exactly, and now it's going to be a little more different. How? Jacob asked worriedly. Richard and I have decided we're not going to be married anymore, Jennifer explained gently. But we'll still be partners in taking care of you. Are you getting divorced? Emma asked directly. Yes, Richard confirmed. But it doesn't change anything about how much we love you. Where are you going to live? Michael asked, clearly concerned. We'll figure that out together, Jennifer said. Maybe we can find a way for everyone to stay close. What about Aunt Sarah? Jacob asked. Is she staying here? Richard looked at Sarah, who was leaning against the doorway. That's up to your mom, he replied. Mom? Emma looked at Sarah. Are you staying? Sarah walked over and sat down with the children. I'll always be close to you, she promised. Wherever you are, I'll be there. But what about that professor? Michael asked innocently. Sarah smiled. David will have to wait until I sort things out with our family first. Do you like him? Emma asked. I do, he's a good person, but you kids are more important. Mum, Emma said seriously, you deserve to be happy. If you like him, we want to meet him. Jacob and Michael nodded. Richard felt a pang in his chest, but also pride at the children's maturity. Okay, Sarah agreed, but only after we've settled everything here at home. In the following months, the Anderson family went through a complete reorganization. Richard and Jennifer finalized their divorce amicably. Jennifer began a relationship with Dr. Frank, who turned out to be a kind man who got along well with the kids. Richard bought a big house in the same neighborhood so the children could stay close to Jennifer. Sarah agreed to live with him and the kids, but in separate rooms. Just until I find my own place, she insisted. Of course, Richard agreed, though secretly he hoped she'd change her mind. David, the professor, was introduced to the kids and proved to be genuinely caring. He treated Emma and Jacob with respect and warmth, never trying to replace Richard. He's nice, Emma remarked after their first dinner with David. He doesn't pretend to be our dad, but he doesn't treat us like strangers either. And he makes Mom smile, Jacob observed. Michael, meanwhile, split his time between his dad's house with Sarah and the kids and his mum's house with Dr. Frank. He adjusted well to both routines. It's cool having 2 homes, he said. At Mum's, I can do chemistry experiments with Frank. At Dad's, I can play with my siblings. 1 year after all the changes, the unconventional family had found their new balance. Richard and Sarah had developed a respectful friendship, but he still held on to hope of winning her back. Sarah continued dating David, but Richard noticed she still kept certain emotional barriers. On a December evening, Sarah was in the garden of their new home, watching the children play in the pool. Richard approached with 2 cups of coffee. Thank you, she said, accepting the cup. How was your class's graduation dinner? Richard asked. Sarah had finished her teaching degree at the end of the year. It was nice. David was proud. And you? Are you proud of yourself? I am, Sarah smiled. It was hard studying and working at the same time, but I did it. You've always been determined. That's one of the things I've always admired about you. Sarah looked at him curiously. Richard, why don't you ever give up? Give up on what? On trying to win me back. I'm dating another man. I've rebuilt my life. Why do you keep trying? Richard thought carefully before answering. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. Because I spent years wondering what if. Because now that you're back, I can't imagine losing you again. Richard, you didn't lose me. I'm here. We're a family, raising our kids together. Why isn't that enough? Because I still love you. And I know you still feel something for me, too. Sarah was silent for a long moment. What if I do? She finally asked. What if part of me still loves you? Would that change anything? It would change everything. Why? I've built a new life, Richard. I have a good man who loves me, who wants to marry me, who treats me well. Why would I throw that away for someone who already hurt me once? Richard felt as if he'd been punched. David proposed to you? He did. The day before yesterday. And what did you say? I told him I needed time to think. Sarah, Richard began, but she interrupted him. Richard, do you want to know the truth? The truth is that when David proposed, the first thing I thought of was you. How different it would be if it were you asking. And that scared me. Richard felt hope rising in his chest. Why did it scare you? Because it means I haven't completely moved on from you. And that's not fair. Not to me, not to David, not even to you. Sarah, what if you don't have to move on? What if it's possible to get back what we had? What we had ended 9 years ago, Richard. We're different people now. We are. But that doesn't mean we can't build something new. Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. Richard, I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of believing in you again and being abandoned once more. Afraid of putting our kids in a complicated situation. Afraid of hurting David. He doesn't deserve that. Richard stepped closer and took her hands. Sarah, I understand your fears. They're all valid. I hurt you before, and I know I can't just ask you to forget that. But I can ask for a chance to prove I've changed. How? Give me 6 months. 6 months to prove I can be the man you deserve. If after that time you still want to marry David, I'll accept it and never bother you with my feelings again. Sarah was silent, considering the offer. And David? What do I tell him? The truth. That you need time to be sure of your feelings. What if he doesn't want to wait? Then maybe he isn't the right man for you. Sarah laughed softly. You're very sure of yourself, you know that. It's not confidence. It's desperation disguised as hope. That night, Sarah spoke to David about Richard's proposal. Just as Richard had predicted, David wasn't happy, but he showed understanding. Sarah, if you need time to be sure of your feelings, I'd rather you take that time now, he said. I don't want to marry someone who has doubts. David, this isn't about you not being good enough. I know. It's about you having unfinished history with him. You're an incredible man. You deserve someone who loves you without reservations. And I hope that after these 6 months, that person will still be you. In the following months, Richard dedicated himself to proving to Sarah that he had changed, not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through small everyday actions. He woke up early to make breakfast for the kids, helped Emma with her school projects, taught Jacob math, talked with Sarah about her dreams, her fears, her hopes. Richard also changed his relationship with work. He delegated more responsibilities to focus on his family. He attended every school meeting, every important event for the kids. Daddy, you're different, Emma remarked one night at dinner. Different how? More present. Before, you were always talking about work. Now you talk to us about important things. What important things? About our dreams, what we want to be when we grow up, about our fears. Richard smiled. Kids always noticed more than adults realized. Sarah noticed the changes too. Richard had become more attentive, more present, more emotionally mature. He listened when she spoke, remembered important details, supported her professional dreams. I got the promotion at school, Sarah announced one evening. Congratulations. Richard stood to hug her, genuinely happy. I'll be the academic director. It's everything I've ever wanted. You deserve it. You've worked so hard. It means more pay, more responsibility, and it means you'll be even more fulfilled professionally. I'm proud of you. Sarah was moved by the sincerity in Richard's voice. David had been happy for her too, but Richard seemed to understand the deeper meaning of this achievement for her. In the 4th month of their 6-month agreement, Something happened that shifted the dynamic between them. Jacob fell ill with pneumonia, similar to what Dorothy had once had. Richard cancelled all work commitments to stay at the hospital with his son. Sarah did the same. They spent 3 days and 2 nights taking turns by Jacob's bedside. "He'll be okay," Richard murmured, holding Sarah's hand as Jacob slept under sedation. "I know, but I'm so scared of losing him, of losing any of them." "You won't. We're a strong family. We'll get through this together." Sarah looked at Richard and saw genuine worry in his eyes. She saw paternal love, fear, determination. In that moment, she realized Richard truly had changed. When Jacob recovered, the family threw a welcome home celebration. Emma and Michael made posters. Jennifer and Dr. Frank brought sweets. Dorothy came for dinner. "Thank you all for taking care of my brother," Michael said, hugging Jacob. "Thank you for being the best family in the world," Jacob replied, still weak but smiling. Sarah watched the scene, her heart warming. This really was her family. Strange, complicated, but full of love. That night, after everyone had left, Sarah found Richard in the garden. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For taking care of Jacob like he was, well, like he really is. Your son." "He is my son, Sarah. Emma too, just like Michael is your son in every way that matters." "I know, but seeing you at the hospital, watching you care for him, it reminded me of the man I fell in love with all those years ago." Richard's heart raced. Is that good or bad? "It's confusing," Sarah admitted, "because it means my feelings for you never truly died. They were just asleep." "Sarah." "Richard, I'm scared." "Why?" "Because I'm falling for you all over again, and I'm afraid it might just be nostalgia or gratitude or something else that isn't real love." Richard moved closer to her slowly. "And how will we know if it's real love?" "I don't know. How does anyone know?" "Maybe. Maybe we stop overthinking and just feel." Sarah looked at Richard for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 9 years, she allowed herself to kiss him. The kiss was shy at first, full of hesitation and fear, but then it grew more intense, loaded with years of longing, regret, and hope. When they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "I still love you," Sarah whispered. "I never stopped loving you," Richard replied. "So now what?" "Now we figure out how to make it work this time." 2 months later, Sarah officially ended her relationship with David. It was a difficult but respectful conversation. "I'm so sorry, David. You're a wonderful man, but you still love the father of your children," he finished with a sad smile. "How did you know?" "Sarah, anyone with eyes can see how you look at each other. I always knew I was competing with an unfinished story. You deserve someone who loves you completely, and I'll find that person, just like you found your way back to your love." David hugged Sarah tenderly and left her life with dignity. A month later, Richard made a request that surprised everyone. "Sarah, will you marry me?" They were in the garden, the same spot where they had talked so often over the past months. The kids were playing in the pool, oblivious to the importance of the moment. "Richard, I know it's soon. I know we still have a lot to figure out, but I don't want to wait any longer to officially start our life together. What if it doesn't work? What if we realize we're incompatible? Then we'll figure it out as a married couple fighting for the relationship, not as 2 people testing whether it's worth it." Sarah laughed. "Is that your marriage proposal? Let's get married to see if we're compatible." "My proposal is, let's get married because we love each other, because we're a family, because we want to build a future together. And if problems come up, we'll face them together, as people committed to each other." Sarah looked at the kids, who were now huddled by the pool laughing at some inside joke. "The kids will be happy," she murmured. "I hope so. But the question is, will you be happy?" Sarah looked at Richard, the man who had broken her heart at 20, who had left her pregnant, but who had also become a devoted father and a better man. "Yes," she finally said, "I will be happy." The wedding took place 6 months later, a simple ceremony in the backyard. Emma was the maid of honor. Jacob and Michael were the ring bearers. Jennifer and Dr. Frank were there along with Dorothy, who cried with emotion seeing her daughter finally happy. "Now we're a real family," Emma said during the reception. "We've always been a real family," Sarah corrected. "It was just a little messy." "And now?" Jacob asked. "Now it's organized," Richard answered. "A happy, loving, organized family." Michael raised his soda glass for a toast. "To our crazy family, proving love is stronger than anything." Everyone raised their glasses, laughing and crying at the same time. Years later, when Emma won the national essay contest with a story about unconventional families, she dedicated the award to my family, who taught me that love has no fixed shape, that forgiveness is possible, and that sometimes happy endings take a little longer to arrive, but they're worth waiting for. Richard, now with graying hair, watched from the audience as Emma accepted the award. Beside him, Sarah held his hand, beaming with pride. Jacob was in the front row, applauding his sister next to Michael, who was moved to tears. Jennifer and Dr. Frank, who had married 2 years after Richard and Sarah's wedding, were also there, as was Dorothy, now 75, but still stubborn and proud. "Do you regret anything?" Sarah whispered to Richard. "I regret taking so long to do the right thing," he replied, "but I don't regret the path that brought us here. All the mistakes, all the pain, all the struggles, they shaped us into the people we are today." And who are we today? We're a family, complicated, imperfect, but real, and full of love. Sarah smiled and kissed Richard gently. "I love you. I love you too. Forever this time." On stage, Emma finished her acceptance speech with the words that became the Anderson family motto. Family isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay, choosing to forgive, choosing to love, even when it's hard. It's about turning past mistakes into wisdom for the future. And it's about never giving up on each other, because in the end, all that truly matters is the love we build together. The end. So, what did you think of this story of second chances and forgiveness? How do you think you'd react if you discovered children you never knew existed? Share your thoughts about this unconventional family who found their way to happiness in the comments below. Your participation means so much to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss any of our heartwarming stories.